is Steve Gowdier, and I'm the chairman of the Chamber Forum, also known as the Meddlers. We're going to start this morning. Each candidate will have a 3-minute opening statement. Then each question will give each candidate 2 minutes to answer, and each candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal. At the end of this program, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. Now, this morning, before you all got here, we did a coin toss, and the first opening statement will be from Congressman McClintock, and then we'll do the closing statements in reverse. So with that, I'd like to introduce our candidates for Congress. We have Congressman McClintock, who is here, and we have Mr. Gentlemen, if you'd like to come on up to the podium. So with the coin toss, Mr. Congressman McClintock, we'll start.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for coming today. I especially want to thank the Auburn Chamber for agreeing to host this open forum where people have the opportunity to directly ask questions of the candidates. For my part, you know me and you know where I stand. I think we all realize that our country's at a crossroads, and this generation is either going to restore those uniquely American principles of individual liberty, constitutionally limited government, and personal responsibility that created the most prosperous, happy, just, and free society in the history of mankind, or whether we're simply going to go the road of another failed European social democracy. I focus my work in the Congress on budget issues because I think they're absolutely essential for the prosperity and the security of our nation, and on natural resources issues because they're absolutely essential to the region. On the budget front, I have worked closely with Congressman Paul Ryan, now as one of the senior members of the Budget Committee, on 4 federal budgets, all of which restore our country to fiscal solvency, balance within 10 years, and ultimately pay down the staggering debt that's robbing our children of their future. Those budgets would assure that today's college graduates will be able to retire into a prosperous and debt-free society. I authored the Full Faith and Credit Act to protect the nation's credit that passed the House of Representatives. And I've authored numerous amendments to appropriations bills to reduce the waste and scope of the federal budget. On the Resources Committee, I've fought to restore sound forest management practices to our national forests, to protect them from the increasing scourge of fire that we're now seeing. As we've reduced our timber harvests over the years, we've seen a concomitant increase in the acres destroyed by fire. I don't need to tell you about that in this environment. And I shepherded as member of the as chairman of the House Water and Power Committee, I shepherded the legislation to resolve California's water crisis, strengthen Northern California water rights, and I've produced the legislation to expedite new dam construction in this state. Water shortages are our fault, and we are not going to address them until we begin building more dams. More broadly, I've fought for those principles that have built this country. I have stood on those principles. You've watched me. You know that I will stand and stand firm. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, first I want to thank you for doing this. We had a debate scheduled for tomorrow evening, and my opponent cowardly backed away because he couldn't, control every question that was asked, even to the point of asking the Central Committee Chairman, Dennis Revelle, if he could join the League of Women Voters so that he could vet questions at the last minute. And now we're here, and I thank you for driving from your district, the 7th District, to my district, the 4th District, and making yourself available to the voters to answer their questions. Folks, I'm running for Congress because our Congress is broken, and the free world depends on a strong America, and the 4th District depends on a Congress that's going to do their jobs. We're so ineffective that some congressmen and women don't even live in the districts that they represent, including my opponent. And beyond that, a Congress that's so divided that they're willing to shut down the government last year with really catastrophic effects to our national security posture in the world and also businesses' ability to create and sustain jobs. I grew up in this district. I fought for my country. I've created jobs as a businessman during a recession. And now I see that one of the most important ways I can serve now is to try to fix our Congress. And it starts with eliminating discrimination against women and minorities, keeping our promises to our veterans and seniors, and putting District 4 Californians back to work, and Americans back to work, with smart investments in our district: forest management, infrastructure for transportation and water, protection of our treasures, Lake Tahoe and Yosemite, and keeping our agriculture in this district and surrounding areas strong. My opponent continues to come to the table with the same rhetoric, and it's the same principles that we all follow. I think most of this district believes in constitutionally limited government, individual liberty, and personal responsibility. But what is the congressman doing to get results in those areas? That's the difference between his performance and what I intend to do in Congress. It's not enough to just say the speech and give the Lincoln quote. What kind of coalitions are you building to get results? So that's what my candidacy is about, and that's why I'm running for Congress and would appreciate your vote.
Now we come to the time for questions and answers. As we've already discussed, each candidate has 2 minutes to answer the question from the floor, and each candidate will have 1 minute for rebuttal. What I do ask is that we ask questions directly. We don't want to have statements before a question. We want to keep this as efficient as we can. So anybody who has a question, please raise their hand. Tom.
Major Moore, good morning. Thank you for your service. We all appreciate that. At this venue several months ago, I asked you about why you had never voted when you were in uniform. Never. I've spent 8 years overseas and I always managed to vote. I'm wondering if you have a better answer for me now than you had back then.
Well, I have the same answer now as I had then. I followed a tradition that's been with the Army Officer Corps for decades and over the past century, to follow Generals Eisenhower, Marshall, and Patton, who also didn't vote. It's very important that we have a separation, a military officer corps that is apolitical and that doesn't choose sides, so that they can give unbiased military advice to their commander-in-chief, regardless of the party that commander-in-chief represents. I'm very proud of my service, and I think that it's really dishonorable and disrespectful for my opponent to be sending out those mailers and trying to pit veterans against veterans about this voting issue. It's a long tradition, and I'm serving. I'm serving now. He's made this voting issue such a key part of this campaign. I'm serving now. I've taken off the last year, break from my civilian job, largely self-funding my campaign, because I'm a patriot, I believe in America, and I want to serve it. And I've voted more times in the 4th District than my opponent. He has never registered here. He's never registered. He's 57 years old. He's never bothered to register to vote in the 4th District. And then come up from Southern California to run in a district where, folks are conservative here and you can get elected. But I have the true passion to really represent this district and do what it takes on the national scene, not just further my political career and feather my own nest.
Well, I suppose suppose I could rent a room in Roseville, as Art has done, to claim residency, but I've been quite upfront. I live a few miles outside of the district. I'd like to live in the district, but like many of you, we bought our homes at the top of the market. We've lost half of our value. We've gained back about a quarter of that. Until we gained it back, I don't have the down payment to move. But I come back to this district every single week, unlike many members of Congress. I want to go back to the point over debate, too, because I think it needs to be set straight. The position that I had taken on the debate rules is people should be able to ask their questions directly of the candidates without being filtered through the sponsors of the debate. League of Women Voters refused to do that, so we compromised. We said, fine, we'll ask for a representative of each of the candidates to go through those questions. They agreed. A week before the debate, they reneged on that agreement. I think the Auburn Chamber for allowing me to open for
Well, back to the debate. Tom McClintock, time and time again, disrespects this district. And this is another example. To pull out of a debate that we both committed to for 5 months, the League of Women Voters put a lot of effort into that. And then the next day to just press release your own debate without even calling the Chamber of Commerce president and then leaving the chamber to scramble to put this event on, which I'm glad you did, because I think it's important to voters. We need a congressman who is willing to go face to face with the voters, answer questions, and be accountable. That's the biggest problem we have right now, is that we don't have a Congress and a government that's accountable. And that'll be one of the main points or priorities that I have, is doing everything that I can to keep government accountable, whether it's the Veterans Affairs, making sure that they're accountable every day to take care of our veterans, and any other government agency to deliver the products and services that we pay them our taxpayer dollars to deliver.
Thank you. Congressman, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, Art made a couple of points. One, that I'm feathering my own nest in public office. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to opensecrets.org, you will see the financial status. You'll see the financial status of all the members of Congress. Out of the 435 members of the House, I rank 425th in personal wealth. You can say that I've grown old and gray in the service of my country. You cannot say that I've grown rich. And with respect to Art's pledge that he's going to build bridges to bring people together, you heard his opening statement. He called me a coward. If that statement were made on the House floor, he'd be immediately censured. I'm very proud of the record that I have reaching across the aisle to work with the opposition party. I've always been willing to compromise my policies to advance my principles, but I will not compromise the principles of our nation.
It's time for a question from the floor. Sir, please speak loud.
Congressman, have you ever said that Social Security should be abolished?
I've never said that it should be abolished.
Thank you.
I did write a column when I was in college suggesting that it was an unfair tax on the young by the old. I would again emphasize I wrote that in college. I have been working on the House Budget Committee to restore the Social Security system to fiscal solvency. As you know, the trustees warn us that by 2033, the Social Security system will no longer be able to meet its obligations. By 2030, Medicare will no longer be able to meet its obligations. That's why I worked so hard with Congressman Ryan on the House Budget Committee to restore these systems to a sound fiscal footing. That's why the over 60 senior organizations endorsed my candidacy.
Mr. Moore.
The seniors in this district should be concerned about Social Security. The congressman's right. The road that we're going on right now, we're not putting enough funds into it to make sure that we can keep our promises. But privatizing Social Security is not the answer. And a congressman that wants to go that direction, I think, is dangerous. I'm committed absolutely to keeping our promises to Americans, veterans, and seniors. And one of those is Social Security and Medicare, and make sure that it's there and that those promises are kept.
Again, the work that I've been doing on Social Security, along with my former colleague from Louisiana, Mr. Landry, is to give people a choice. You may remember we had the payroll tax deduction temporarily. That accelerated the insolvency of the Social Security system. What we had proposed as an alternative was to give every American a choice to take the payroll tax deduction and extend their working life by 1 month. In other words, delay their retirement by 1 month, or keep on track and pay the full tax. That would have actually improved the solvency of the fiscal status of Social Security, and at the same time would have given Americans a choice. In tough times, they could take the payroll tax reduction by delaying their retirement for 1 month. It is that freedom of choice that needs to be restored to American seniors as we restore the solvency of the Social Security system. But doing nothing is not an option.
For the Social Security question, we've already gone back.
Are we okay? Maybe I've lost it. Sorry, my apologies. Well, then another question from the floor. I see a hand way in the back. Is that Tom?
Yes. Congressman and Candidate Moore, I'm kind of distressed with the fact that we seem to be spending more money on fire fighting than fire prevention. What in the world is holding up the U.S. government from making its agencies do the necessary clearing and planting and prevention to stop these terrible fires in California?
We need a complete overhaul of the environmental laws. That's what I've been working on the subcommittee on public lands. We've seen an 80% decline in the harvest of timber out of our national forests. Meanwhile, we've seen a concomitant increase in the acres destroyed by fires. As one forester told me long ago, all that excess all that excess timber will come out of the forest one way or another. It'll either be carried out or it will be burned out, but it will come out. When we carried it out, we had much healthier forests that were resistant not only to fire but to disease and pestilence. Since we have consigned our forests to a policy of benign neglect, we have watched increasingly frequent and fierce forest fires and devastation by disease and pestilence. I've fought hard at least to be able to salvage the timber that's been killed by the fires. I wrote legislation on that last year. It passed the House. It stopped dead in the Senate. And before I'm told we should have compromised more, we rewrote that bill, taking every single amendment offered by the Democrats. I personally met with Senator Dianne Feinstein when we moved it to the Senate. She agreed with it, but was not able to move it out of the Senate. You cannot compromise if the Senate will not engage, and that's the problem that we have with about 350 Republican House bills to address economic issues that have been sent over to the Senate only to die there. The good news is, according to the Washington Post, we've got about a 95% chance of seeing that change 3 weeks from today. And then when that happens, I think we're going to have a much more productive progress toward resolving these vital issues.
We've neglected to properly manage our national forests. You know, this district is 70% federal lands. Last summer we had one of the worst catastrophic fires that's ever happened in California, in the Rim Fire. And then we just had the King Fire, another 100,000 acres, probably ranked in the top 10. Now we're paying $5 million a day to fight those fires. You know, and we should go towards more conservative approaches to these issues. If we would spend the right smart investments up front to manage our forests, then we come out on top because we save the 20 times the cost that it takes to put the fire out. And those fires burn so hot that they create permanent damage to the forests. So my opponent hasn't been able to make progress. He's been the congressman in this district for 6 years fighting against federal government spending in a district that's 70% federal lands. The first thing we need to do is acknowledge that the federal government has a role. And then once we acknowledge that the federal government has a role, be willing to spend to make the smart investments in our national forests,
Mr.
and then
Moore,
build
time's up.
coalitions to get things done. You know, constantly being in the media, attacking our federal
Mr.
forest
Moore, time is
managers, and creating relationships that don't work aren't getting us anywhere. We need a congressman who's willing to go work with both sides and all stakeholders,
Mr.
and
Moore,
willing
time
to
is
make
up.
smart investments to get the job done in our national forests.
Let's be fair to both candidates and use the allotted time. Your rebuttal.
You know, Art keeps saying, well, why haven't you done more? An NPR reporter came to me just a couple of weeks ago and said, you know, there have only been 163 bills that have been signed into law during this session of Congress. And I said, I know, it's awful. He says, but you know, yours is one of them. 535 members of the House and the Senate combined, only 163 bills have passed at the House and the Senate and been signed into law. Mine is one of those 163. Not a huge bill, but it takes 40 acres of surplus BLM land that was ready to go up in smoke and provides it to Shingle Springs Tribe for desperately needed housing. So, you know, when Art says, well, you've been there, you should do more, let me ask, what legislative record does he have in any prior office to make those promises? He has no record whatsoever, and he seems to be offended that I pointed out that he has never voted in his life. That's the most fundamental responsibility of any citizen. And the military votes in a higher proportion of the general population.
Well, forest management is just one example. This goes across the board. And that's why I've been endorsed by Governor Pete Wilson, former U.S. Senator and California Governor, Combat Veterans for Congress, 16-year Congressman George Radanovich. You know, these folks have the legislative experience. And they look at my opponent and, you know, they've come to the realization that he's had his opportunity and America's ready for new leadership. We're not going in the right direction. The district is being ignored. The country's Congress is broken. I've talked to several folks on both sides here in the district, which, by the way, the district I've achieved and earned the endorsements of 4 of the 5 county supervisors, and both Republicans here. And back in Washington, the congressman has sidelined himself by voting no on bill after bill after bill. You know, he votes no to funding the CDC. He votes no on any federal government spending in the district. And other congressmen and senators won't work with him, and therefore the bills get stopped. And unless the bills make it through the Congress and the Senate, there's no result.
Time's up, Mr. Moore. Okay, thank you. You had a question. Not sure. Yes. No, man behind you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get you next.
Okay. Congressman, why do you think it is that a majority of supervisors in Placer and El Dorado have endorsed Art, including Republicans? Thank you.
Well, there are some local officials who think that the responsibility of the congressman is to go to Washington, earmark funds, grab as much money from the national treasury as they possibly can and bring it back to the district. I was elected on a different pledge, and that is to restore local control to local communities. We have ended the practice of earmarks, where congressmen could simply torque projects for local communities into the budget. Now they all have to compete on their merit. And the role of the Congressional office has changed to advocating as they compete, and we have done that and done that very effectively. If you look at all of the local officials who've endorsed in this race, you'll find that I've received about 3 times as many local endorsements as Art, because most of the local leaders recognize that it's important to restore local control to local communities rather than having to go back and beg for funds from Washington every year. We've made huge progress during the past 2 sessions in eliminating earmarks, which were not only helping to bankrupt our country, but were corrupting the Congress. And this district had a taste of that recently, before my tenure. So I think we've made great progress in those strides. I'm very proud of the local support that I have, as well as the support of groups like Citizens Against Government Waste, who recognize my work in trying to bring our federal spending back under control. You know, Mike Mullen, the chief of the staff of the military, said that in his professional judgment, the greatest single threat to our national security was the national debt. That was 4 years and $4 trillion of debt ago. So I'm very proud of my record on fiscal issues. That's why I'm endorsed by the National Taxpayers Union, the largest taxpayer organization in the country, who has rated me for the last 2 years in a row the best vote in the House of Representatives for taxpayers. Not one of the best, the best.
Thank you.
No, it's not about bringing pork, it's going back to Washington and bringing as much pork back to the district. The earmark system has already been changed, but what it is about is being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And I've given numerous examples, including the management of our forests, putting smart investments into water infrastructure. Good stewardship of our taxpayer dollars means making smart investments and planning, because the congressman's approach ends up spending more money. The jobs that we've lost because we shut down the government last summer, the catastrophic forest fires because we weren't willing to build coalitions to take care of our forest lands, the loss of GDP from agriculture because we didn't put money since 1979 into water infrastructure, and now we don't have enough. So it's not about pork, it's about making smart investments and being good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. He's been endorsed by special interests based on a voting record, okay? And I'm running because your report card isn't your voting record. Voting no on every bill is easy. And you get a voting record that gets you an endorsement.
Time is up.
Where are the results? I want to see what results have you brought back to me?
Follow the rules.
Follow the rules, please. Your rebuttal, Congressman.
Your mind was wandering when I pointed out that one of the only 163 bills to become law in this session was my bill. My legislation to protect the full faith and credit of the United States government passed the House of Representatives. It stopped in the Senate. My bill to provide for expedited timber salvage of fire-killed timber, which would produce a revenue stream and a huge boom to the local economy, passed the House, stopped in the Senate. Now, it's not that the Senate is sending us legislation back so that we can actually isolate the differences between the houses and work out the compromises necessary to enact legislation. The Senate simply isn't acting. I've not heard one peep of protest from you over Harry Reid and the way the Senate has blocked more than 350 jobs-related bills that House Republicans have sent to the Senate, usually on broad bipartisan votes.
He names a few of those pieces of legislation, as well as renaming a couple post offices and renaming a peak in Yosemite. We need more. We deserve more. What is the congressman doing to protect our borders? In his 6 years in office and prior to, we've seen our state get the Republican Party get completely taken over by Democrats, and we've lost out. What is he doing to control our border? What is he doing to keep our nation strong? And what is he doing about these issues? I asked about forest management. I asked about water infrastructure. He's chairman of the subcommittee on water, and yet the only drought legislation is being driven by 2 other congressmen in adjacent districts. So we need less rhetoric and more results. That's the leadership that I want to bring to the table. He says that I don't have experience. I've been successful in every stage of my life, and I don't plan on being unsuccessful in this role either.
Then I'll go up there. Next.
Mr. Moore, I'd like to know what your level of experience and understanding is of the constitutional role of the federal government within the states regarding things such as Agenda 21, the EPA, and the fight for personal property rights. What is your experience, understanding, and constitutional knowledge of that?
I believe in individual liberty, constitutionally limited government, and personal responsibility. The government needs to stay out of our bedrooms, needs to have less of a role in our lives, and needs to be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so that speaks to all 3 of those issues. And I'm committed, as a congressman, to actually fight and build coalitions to get results.
How?
What we hear from Art is simple rhetoric, based on absolutely no record of ever working in a legislative environment, ever compromising to get the agreements that are necessary to move legislation such as mine through both houses and to the president to get a signature. As I have pointed out, he is 37 years old. He has never voted in his life until he rented a room in Roseville in order to pursue this congressional seat. I would ask, if he felt so passionately about these issues, why wasn't he writing letters to the editor? Why wasn't he at least tweeting on Twitter? The fact of the matter is that he was only in the Army regular Army for 5 years. For the past 9, he's been in the Maryland National Guard. He's pointed out he's still in the Maryland National Guard. He needs to explain why was it improper for him to vote all those years as a member of the Maryland National Guard, but now it is proper for him to seek a congressional office, having never voted until he arrived here to rent a room in Roseville.
Yes.
Well, the dishonesty for my opponent continues. I think that I've gone up and down the district. I've talked to Tea Party Republicans, progressive Democrats, and everyone in between. And they're all getting on board my campaign because I think they deserve an honest representative who's also going to work hard and put their interests first, put the district first. This is another example of dishonesty. I was on active duty as recently as November of 2013. I've served 8 years on active duty. I've deployed 30 months overseas, twice to Iraq, once to Egypt. I'm a combat veteran, Bronze Star recipient, West Point graduate. And I rented a room temporarily when I moved back to the district. Now I live in an apartment in Roseville. And I grew up in Auburn. He's never lived in the district. And he still doesn't live in the district. He promised voters in 2008 when he was elected that he would move here, and he still hasn't.
Thank you, Mr.
I think that the most important issue facing our nation is that I live a few miles outside of the district, and by all means vote for Art Moore. But if you think that injustice is the great issue facing our country, I would like you to take a look at the years and years of work that I have put in on these issues. I honor Art Moore's military service, but I don't think he should use it as an excuse for neglecting his fundamental responsibility as a citizen to vote. That is how we defend the Constitution here at home. It is George Washington said, when we take up arms for our country, we do not lay down our responsibilities as citizens, as Art Moore did. I think it's an insult to every soldier who has cast votes under extremely difficult circumstances. And I'd also like to pose one other question to him. If he thinks it's improper for Army officers to vote, why is it then that he has been soliciting political contributions from active duty Army officers?
We have a question up on top. Please speak loud.
I have a question on campaign finance reform. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, Peter.
All right. Since the Citizens United decision, many of us have worried that we're losing our democracy to a plutocracy of corporations who are able to buy elections. If elected, what will you do to address the Citizens United decision in particular and campaign finance reform in general?
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Well, first of all, 92% of my contributions come from individuals. But with respect to Citizens United, I think that was the correct decision. Citizens United is a group of people who came together to pool their resources. That's democracy. People have that right. It is called freedom of speech, and the Supreme Court made an important step in defending that freedom of speech by saying that folks have the freedom to come together, pool their resources, to promote their individual views in that great marketplace of ideas. I don't believe in restrictions on free speech. That's what the First Amendment is all about, and I think that the Supreme Court made an important step in defending that amendment with the Citizens United decision.
I agree. I agree with the congressman on this, but I will say that I think the most important thing we can do to make the system more transparent is that these donations that are made and these contributions should be available to the public to see right away. As soon as a donor makes a contribution, it should be public knowledge and easily accessible. I think that will go a long way to to making the system more transparent. I want to go back to another issue too on this. I'm a passionate combat veteran who served my nation overseas. I'm disrespected when the congressman suggests that I didn't do my duty. To suggest that President Eisenhower, it wasn't appropriate for him to run for president because he hadn't voted in his years of service, that disrespects entire generations of veterans. And like I said before, I may not have voted while I served. It was a principled decision. But right now, I've given up a year to serve in Congress and represent this district and try to turn the country around. I'm very concerned about the country,
Mr. Moore.
and we just need new leadership. We need a new generation of leadership.
Your service to our country. I wish you would respect me for my service to our country of fighting to defend our Constitution here at home. And the point I'm trying to emphasize to you is that the way that we defend our Constitution at home is through the votes that we cast. That is no disrespect. That's a simple fact. And when you aspire to cast votes every single day on the House floor, I think it's appropriate for people to ask, why have you never voted in all of the elections since you left active duty and served in the National Guard? You just said you serve in the National Guard right now as an officer. That's been the case since you left the regular Army. You didn't think it was appropriate to vote then. You now think it's appropriate to run for Congress, having never entered that marketplace of ideas, never stood up for our these principles here at home.
Time is up,
That's the
Congressman.
question I think most people have.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Moore.
Sure, I'll be glad to answer it. I'm serving now. The Founding Fathers never envisioned that we'd have these professional politicians that all they've done is been a career politician. And I think to get this country turned around and get better representation for this district, we ought to have people with real-world experience. I have real-world business experience, and I've served in the military. I think that will serve the Congress well. Right now we have 16 members of Congress out of the over 400 that have served. And yet we face some significant threats on the national security stage. I've also worked in the intelligence community, CIA and NSA, and I understand these organizations. I understand what it means to keep Americans safe. And so putting more of us in Congress matters. And it's back to honesty, too. Let's have the congressman explain why he hasn't moved to the district, or why he collected a pension, why he's taking his state pension and collecting his congressional salary when he said he wouldn't. And why he no longer says he's a Tea Party candidate when he's been running as a Tea Party candidate the whole time. He'll do whatever he can to get elected.
Time is up, Mr. Moore. Okay. Do we have a question? So I have him in the side of the room, right back there. Please speak up.
Well, I've kind of had enough of who votes when, who doesn't vote when. I think that's the most important. I would like to know, I personally feel that global climate change is the biggest issue facing the United States and the world as a whole. And I'd like to know what your feelings are on what you as a congressman are doing or can do to address the situation, because I think that we really owe it to our kids and our grandkids to be serious about this.
Mr. Moore, would you go first?
Sure. I grew up here in the 4th District in Auburn. I was in Boy Scouting my entire young life. I achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. One of the tenets of that organization and some of the values that I think the 4th District holds dear is taking care of the environment. And I am not a climate change denier. I think that humans do play a role in the shaping of the environment, and we need to be good stewards of the environment. Now, having said that, I think California has gone too far to passing regulations that have crippled our economy. Businesses are leaving. So while other nations like India and China aren't doing their fair share. So attacking this climate change problem has to be a global effort, and as a government, and as the leader of the free world, America needs to take the lead in this area as well as national security to get other countries on board to attack this issue. And so that's how I want to attack it. And I want to do more in the United States as well, but we need to do it at the right time. While we're getting out of a recession is not the right time.
Congressman.
Well, I need to point out that the planet has been warming on and off since the last ice age. The climate has been changing for the last 4 billion years. And whether or not we destroy our economy and our energy independence, chasing after carbon reductions, the world is going to continue to warm and cool as it has for billions of years. What we're seeing is this natural phenomenon being used as an excuse to shut down electricity through coal, and petroleum production through fracking. We have the opportunity right now for American energy independence. If you want to know what an energy-independent America looks like, it looks a lot like North Dakota, where they have the lowest unemployment rate in the country and a booming economy. And if you want to know what the world looks like with an energy-independent America, it's a world in which we don't have to give a damn what the Saudis do.
We have to be good stewards of our environment, and climate change is happening. We just need to be smart about how we go about it. It needs to be a global solution, and right now is not the time to make it #1 priority in California. Jobs are what we need in District 4 and in the state. And what can we do to bring middle-class jobs to the 4th District in California? These regulations, spearheaded by EPA and in California, EPA as well, are crippling small business. And so what can we do to build the coalitions to remove those big rocks in Washington, make those regulations easier to navigate, bring more predictability so that businesses will be here and we can attract new business?
Congressman.
Well, I would point out that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has looked at the work I've done for job creation in the United States and endorsed me. The National Federation of Independent Business, representing small businesses, has looked at my record in Washington and endorsed me. The Club for Growth is rated to be one of the 4 best votes for job creation in the entire nation. The National Association of Manufacturers has given me its Legislative Excellence Award for my work in job creation. This is one of the fundamental problems facing our country. We've now been through 6 years of economic stagnation because of policies that don't work. I want to see freedom restored. Freedom works, and it's time that we put it back to work.
Yes, we heard Congressman McClintock talk about how he's trying to eliminate the staggering $17 trillion deficit that we're going to pass on to our kids and our grandkids. I'd like to hear Mr. Moore's plan for eliminating that deficit.
Mr. Moore?
The way to eliminate the deficit is to get our economy working again. And that's why one of my main priorities is to create jobs and promote business. His endorsement by Chamber of Commerce comes from a voting record. And like I said before, a voting record is only one piece of a report card. Is he winning those votes? What's he doing to build coalitions to get results for the district in the areas that I've already mentioned? And that's what voters need to decide in this election. Do you want more rhetoric, or do you want to give a new generation a chance to get results and get the country moving again?
Yeah, it comes down to this. We know how to fix an economy. We've done it many times before. When Ronald Reagan inherited the Carter economy, double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation, mile-long lines around gas stations, interest rates at 20.5%. He reduced the tax and regulatory burdens that were crushing our economy and produced a period of profound economic expansion. We are suffering through this lost decade precisely because this administration is pursuing exactly the opposite policies with exactly the opposite results. The job creators understand that. I think the American people now understand that. And I wonder how effective a member of Congress can be if he pledges, as Art pledged to the Amador Progressive Women, that I'm not going to be the kind of Republican that's in the news attacking our president. I don't know how you attack these policies without pointing out that these are policies that have utterly failed us. We know they don't work. We are working very hard in the House to restore the policies that we know do work.
Now, that's why the country's in the trouble that it's in, is because we have congressmen like my opponent who refuse to talk or work with the other side. Constantly in the news, pointing fingers, making excuses for why he and his supporters can't make progress. The only thing that's going to fix this country is both parties working together, coming to points where they agree, and passing legislation and actually making government work. And no clearer was that evident than last year when both sides were willing to shut down the government without any thought to how that affects national security and businesses' ability to create jobs. So yes, I'm not going to be the type of Republican that's constantly in the news attacking our president on national security issues and other things that aren't even the business of Congress. It's the Senate's role to handle these foreign affairs. Congressmen need to do what the Founding Fathers intended and represent their constituents. So that's my focus of my platform, representation and representing the district.
To Art, that the power of the purse is vested with the representatives of the people in the House of Representatives. If he would abrogate that responsibility to the Senate, he is just short-circuiting one of the most important provisions that we have in the American Constitution. And as far as reaching across party lines, I pointed out time and again, I've done that. I've succeeded in doing that. I'm one of the few members who has, and I've got a record to show for it. I ask again, Art, what is your record in effecting compromises in a legislative setting? You have none. These are empty promises and rhetoric. I'm running on a record that has been recognized by the watchdogs who watch the candidates.
Our last question for the day. So, see, where haven't we been? Right there in the back.
I would like, is it me?
Yeah, it's you.
I would like to hear, instead of what everybody can't do, because I know our bureaucracy is crippling, and that'll be in education. I've heard jobs twice. How are we going to create jobs in this bureaucracy? I have 3 businesses, and I spend most of my money for compliance on everything. How are we going to create jobs other than forest and water and government spending in order to create, the government paying for those jobs?
Congressman, can you go first?
As I pointed out, we know how to fix an economy. We've done it many times before, but you've got to reduce the burdens that government is placing on the economy. This administration is moving in exactly the opposite direction. And this is what has got to be rolled back. The House has passed legislation, 350 bills, as I said, to do so. The Senate has refused to act on those. I think the American people are about to act on the Senate, and in 3 weeks, Harry Reid is no longer going to be majority leader of the Senate, will no longer be able to block this vital legislation. But let me also point out, this is not just a Republican policy. After the drubbing that Bill Clinton took in 1994. He declared the era of big government is over. He reached across the aisle to a Republican Congress, and together they worked some real miracles. They reduced federal spending by 4% of GDP. They attacked entitlement spending and abolished the entire open-ended welfare system we had at the time. They approved what amounted to the biggest capital gains tax cut in American history, and the economy flourished. That's the model that we have to follow.
No, I agree. We do need to follow, the limited government model, remove some of these regulations. We need to get legislation through the House and the Senate. But even if Harry Reid loses the Senate, we still have a Democratic president for 2 more years. So this rhetoric of constantly not being willing to talk to the other side is not going to work for 2 more years. We need results now. And we need to build those jobs, but we also need to fill the jobs that we have. The Governors Association has said that there's a lot of jobs out there that are unfilled because our education system is failing. So what are we doing to educate our young people so that they have the skills of the 21st century and can fill the jobs that exist. So it's about education, and it's about limited government, letting the free market work to get this economy back on track.
Again, ask yourself, who are the organizations that are devoted day in and day out to job creation supporting? And the answer is every one of them. The Chamber of Commerce, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, they are supporting my reelection because they recognize the work that I've been doing. Once again, I've got to point out, let me just put it this way. This is from Dennis Kucinich, a note in his own hand. Tom, your partnership has been indispensable to the success of our efforts to defend the Constitution. What a joy it has been to work with you. I look forward to a future opportunity where we may once again demonstrate the triumph of principle over politics. Best wishes, Dennis. The people of this district recognize that. In the all-voter June primary, I ran 11 points ahead of the Republican Party registration. That means an awful lot of Democrats and an awful lot of independents have also recognized the work that I am doing in Congress on behalf of the people of this district.
Those organizations have endorsed my opponent because of a voting record, and as I've said before, it is very easy to go back to Washington and just vote no across the board and not develop any meaningful legislation that impacts and affects the district. I want the congressman to answer to the voters about why he doesn't live in the district, why he did not take, the government has worked very well for my opponent, but the government has not worked well for District 4 or the country. And, we need a congressman who's going to do the work. My opponent said he would move to the district and didn't. Said he wouldn't take a pension and his congressional salary at the same time and still does. Took per diem payments saying that he lived in temporary housing in Elk Grove while claiming a residence in Thousand Oaks, and then can't move to the district because of the temporary housing. Was he lying then or is he lying now? We need a congressman we can trust. That's what's important. This is a character race. This isn't about a voting record.
Mr. Moore, time is up. First up, before we get to the closing, you've done your rebuttal, sorry. You'll have your closing statement, Congressman. By flip of the coin, it was decided that the order in which we would have our opening statement and our closing statement. When we get ready for the closing statement, Mr. Moore will go first, followed by Congressman McClintock. But before that, first I'd like to thank all of you for coming here. This is our republic, our democracy in action. This is why the Chamber of people who make the decisions for us, the people we vote for. I'd also like to thank Rich Johnson, our official timekeeper. Thank you. Between both camps here, Mr. Camps here. Mr. Moore, you start first with your closing statement. He has 2 minutes.
I grew up in this district. I'm passionate about my country. I've served overseas on 3 deployments, and I've created jobs during a recession. And now I want to go to work for the district as your congressman. I'm committed to getting results, working with both sides, meeting with and representing all constituents, not just one small piece of the district. And it's about accountability. The current congressman has had a record for 6 years now. He's been the congressman. And that should be plenty of time to have a report card to judge whether he's getting the results that we need for the district and whether he's being an honest representative. And I would submit that his record has failed. He has a voting record, but very little results to show. And the district is suffering. We haven't properly managed our forests. We haven't put any money into infrastructure for water and transportation and agriculture. And that's why I've been endorsed by Republican leaders, Democratic leaders, independent leaders. I've been endorsed by Governor Pete Wilson, George Radanovich, 4 county supervisors of the 5 in Placer County, combat veterans for Congress. The list goes on. I've also been supported by agriculture because they know that this congressman has done nothing from his position to advance and prepare our region with water resources. So I'm asking for your vote, and I am committed to doing the hard work necessary to get not only the district the representation that it deserves, but move our country forward so that our generations, our children, and our grandchildren will be able to live the American dream like the generations before. And right now, I think we're on the wrong path.
I think the House is moving us in the right path by restoring those fundamental principles that produce prosperity, by reducing the burdens that government is placing on the American people, by reducing the deficit. And the budget plans that I have been involved in producing year in and year out point the way to that future. The problem is we have an unwilling partner in the Senate, and as I said, I believe that that is about to change. Then we will be able to resolve the differences between the two houses and begin moving that legislation to the desk of the President. I've not heard Art criticize the Senate Democrats for obstructing these 350 job-creating pieces of legislation. I've not heard him criticize the Senate and the President for running up the worst deficits in the peacetime history of this country. I have not heard him criticize the policies that have produced this 6 years of debt and doubt and despair. I have worked day in and day out on these issues. And that's why all the groups that watch the candidates on these issues support me. And yes, part of it is because of my voting record. As I said, the National Taxpayers Union says that I am the best vote for taxpayers in the entire U.S. House of Representatives for the last 2 years running. Not one of the best, the best. I understand that Art doesn't understand the importance of a vote. We've already gone through that. But those votes are important, and the legislation that we are producing out of the House Natural Resources Committee and the House Budget Committee are absolutely essential for the economy of this region and the future of this nation. It has been an honor serving you in the Congress. You know me, you know where I stand. I've got lots of adversaries among those who want to expand the burdens that government's placed on our economy, but even they will tell you they know where I stand and they know that I will stand firm.
We have a hand for both of our candidates.